Welcome. We're a week late on this lesson, but I think that'll be okay. As I'd mentioned before, last week was Ash Wednesday, which is the beginning of the Lent season, and so 46 days before Easter, and it's a common practice in a lot of churches. Baptists, we tend to kind of throw out all the ceremony and liturgy stuff, in our desire to get away from the legalism and the tradition. Sometimes we get rid of some good stuff. And I like Lent. I like the idea that you're fasting, but most people don't actually fast food. Give up something. And so I thought, well, hey, what a wonderful lesson for Ash Wednesday as we begin Lent. We'll talk about fasting. But then we fasted from getting out of our homes because everything was frozen over and roads were all icy and slick and nobody got to go anywhere. So we are a week late on the lesson about fasting. However, I will say, I want to say obeying, because we're not commanded to fast. We'll get to that in a minute. But, doing things for God, doing things, spiritual growth and discipline, you can be like, oh, darn, it already started. Oh, well, no, go ahead and jump on in if you want to. It's never too late to start to do something. I think I mentioned that I've actually given up social media for Lent. The way Lent works is it's 46 days, and every Sunday is a feast day. So whatever it is you're fasting from, you're allowed to partake in. Normally, the way that works is you're actually fasting, right? So you're way limited in what you're eating and whatever. And then on Sunday, you feast and you celebrate because it's the Lord's Day. And I think that's how that originally went, but we've kind of shifted that over the years. Anyway.
So you're on social media on Sunday?
So on Sunday. But I'm making sure it's all church. I don't consider YouTube social media because I'm not talking and reading comments and stuff. That's just where I'm. Instead of podcasts, I just do everything through YouTube. So, okay. So, fasting is one of those weird things that we see it all through the Bible, right? We know that we should, but a lot of times we don't, right? It doesn't tend to be a big part of a lot of Christians' lives. And so I thought, well, let's address that. Let's talk about fasting. And as I was reflecting with James, talking beforehand, as I was preparing this, it easily could have been like a 2-month series. I was like, no, let's hit the high points. Let's kind of, just get into it so we get an idea, a reminder, refresher course of what fasting is, and hopefully some motivation to begin partaking. So what is fasting? Anyone have a definition of fasting? Anyone want to throw out?
To do without.
To do without? Sacrifice? A time of reflection. It is indeed all of that and can be more. Let me tell you a couple things fasting is not. Fasting is not a diet plan. If you get online and you're like, I want to, look up some stuff about fasting, you get on Google and you're like, or not Google, some other search engine that's not Google, and you type in, something about fasting, 2/3 of everything that pops up is going to be about diets. Fasting is not a diet. It's not I need to lose weight, so I'm going to fast. That's not what the Bible teaches. Fasting is not a way to get God to do what we want. Right? It's not like some special magical ritual where it's like, if I do this, then God will really hear my prayer and he'll do it then. That's not what fasting is, because you can't force God to do something. There is nothing in the Bible, nothing in the Christian life, nothing about God that we're able to do. And it's like, if you do this, then he will. No, God's going to do what he wants to do. You can't make him do anything. He's sovereign. You're not. So fasting is not like a special way to pull the magic lever to get God to do what you want. What we see over and over again in the Bible is that fasting occurs when there is a need for a spiritual breakthrough due to the burdens of life, some circumstance that's going on, some major decision or undertaking to be made. And so people fast and pray and get before God to draw close to him. You get Nehemiah, right? Whenever his heart's being burdened for Jerusalem, he's hearing the reports of Jerusalem where the walls are torn down and the temple's not there. And so he wants to do something about it. And so he fasts. He fasts and prays before he goes to the king and asks for the king's permission to rebuild the walls. Esther, right? Whenever it comes and it's like, hey, your people, that man is going to wipe out your people. You've got to do something. And she says, okay, I will go into the king, even though it might get me killed. You tell the people to pray and fast for 3 days before she went into the king. They were fasting. In Acts chapter 6, we see where the church commissions Paul and Barnabas as missionaries to go forth and preach the gospel. Well, first they're fasting and praying before they make the decision, and then after they make the decision, they're fasting and praying before they send them. And then, of course, the one we're all well aware of, that Jesus fasted 40 days and 40 nights prior to beginning his earthly ministry. So we see people undertaking fasting at times where they're needing a breakthrough. There's something going on that they're needing to draw close to God. They're needing his favor. They're needing his presence. They're needing his voice. Or just in situations where, there's something going on here. I just got to break the log jam, in my spiritual life. This is a definition that I heard last week, and I thought, this is a pretty good one. Fasting is the deliberate abstinence of physical gratification in order to achieve a spiritual goal, or a denial of the flesh in order to get a response from the spirit. So you're saying, hey, the things of this world, I don't want to be obsessed with the things of this world, right? It's the things of God that I'm after. So I'm going to put the things of this world aside. I'm going to focus on the things of God. So that is what fasting is, that you're abstaining from something worldly, usually food, because food actually doesn't just kind of get the psychological effect, you actually get the biological effect going on, and as your flesh is, I heard someone mention that, when you starve your flesh, the flesh is weak, so it doesn't have the strength to hold you back as you're reaching for God, and so, okay. Any questions about just kind of definitionally what fasting is? Anything to add or questions on that? Okay, so why should we fast? Because like I said before, it's actually not commanded. For Christians in the New Testament, fasting is never commanded. We're never told you must fast. See, in the Old Testament, they had days where they were required to fast. In the law of Moses, where you fast on this day. They spent probably a third of their year not eating. They're constantly fasting. So why should we? We don't have to. The Bible doesn't tell us, doesn't command it. So why should we?
To lose weight, you said that earlier.
To lose weight, right? There you go. We've already been over this. You do it to lose weight. There's actually many different reasons why you might choose to fast. We've already touched on a few. We'll dig in a little bit more. But they all they center on the need to draw closer to Christ. That whatever the situation is, whether I'm needing to hear a word from the Lord, whether I'm struggling with some temptation, whether I'm considering some major decision, whatever it is, I'm needing to be close to God. This situation in my life, I'm just needing to be close. Here, let's look at a little insight the Bible gives into why we fast and how it has to do with Christ. In Matthew chapter 9, verses 14 and 15, John's disciples come to Jesus and they say, "Why do we and the Pharisees fast often, but your disciples do not fast?" Right? They're following the law of Moses. They're following, all that. And so they're coming and going, we're noticing we got this fasting thing going on, but your disciples aren't fasting, which would be really weird. It's like, you're the Messiah. Your guys aren't fasting. I thought we're supposed to fast. So what's up? And so, but the days will come when the bridegroom will be taken away from them, and then they will fast. See, the point of fasting is Jesus. To draw close to Jesus, to get some intimacy with Jesus. And he's there. Why would they need to fast? He's right there, right next to him. He says, but the day will come when he is gone, and then they're going to need to. And one thing I find interesting is that he compares it to mourning, grieving, lamenting. It's like, while the bridegroom is there, you're not in grieving, you're partying, right? He's using the idea of a wedding. There's the bridegroom, he's here, feast is on. But when the bridegroom's not there, there's no wedding, there's no celebration. That's when you would mourn. And I think that is an interesting point because it ties into so many of the reasons of why we fast. You can fast out of grief. We'll actually see one example, I believe it's in Samuel where that happens, where you're going through a situation that just has you, so much angst or whatever, where you're like, I've got to get before God. There's a tension and angst, conflict, that you're needing to draw close to God. So there's that idea there. Few points to make about fasting. Fasting has a purpose. Whenever you fast, you do it for a reason. You don't just go, well, people are supposed to fast, so I'm just going to not eat for a few days. No. Why are you fasting? What is the thing? Everywhere in the Bible where you see someone fasting, they're not just fasting, just not to fast. There's a reason for it. Even in the Old Testament, the days that are commanded for the Jews to fast, there's a reason for it. Right? There is something to remember. There's something to commemorate. There's something that is an act of obedience they're supposed to be doing. Right? There's something tied to it. You don't ever just go, well, fasting gets me closer to Jesus, so I'm just going to stop eating for a few days. That's not what fasting is. There is a purpose. Fasting expresses the urgency of the prayer. Fasting is always tied to prayer. Fasting and praying. Fasting and praying. If you're not praying, you're not really fasting, you're just skipping meals. Fasting is tied to prayer. Imagine that what it communicates is, I need this. Whatever it is, I'm saying, God, I need your presence. I need your voice. I need your counsel. I need your intimacy. I need your forgiveness. I need this more than I need food. And that creates that urgency. It's expressing this idea that I need this more than I desire that. This thing, food, that sustains me and keeps me alive is less important than what I'm coming to you with, God. So fasting expresses that urgency. It also increases humility and our dependence on God as we fast. Right? You're setting aside your own desires and needs. To be in the mindset where you're going to say, I need this, I want this, but I'm going to put it aside, is a willful act of denying yourself. So you're practicing humility. You're saying, you know what? I'm not going to depend on the food, God. I need you. I want to depend on you. And so it's kind of training you in humility and discipline in seeking God. It's a kind of a spiritual discipline, right? If you go get a book that teaches you spiritual disciplines, there's going to be a chapter there on fasting because it's a habit. It forms this habit of self-denial, right? Not like delusional, but like denying yourself, denying your own pleasure and gratification. And so through fasting, you're practicing denying yourself and following Christ, seeking Christ. And what I think is interesting about that, and I think this is more of a side effect. I don't know that I would say this is maybe shouldn't be front and center of why you fast, but it is a side effect of fasting that you're training, right? And whenever someone's training, they're doing it in a controlled environment, right? To think of a boxer, right? A boxer actually prepares himself before he steps in the ring. He doesn't just go in there and be like, well, I'll figure this out as I go, right? He actually trains and conditions his body for the fight ahead. And so when we're fasting, when we make a habit of fasting, we're practicing denying the gratification of the flesh and pursuing Jesus. So I think that's probably a little more of a side effect of it, but that is something of fasting. Fasting exposes our hidden idols and temptations. Two things there. One, as soon as you start pursuing God, you're going to draw the attention of the enemy because he wants to keep you away from God, away from Christ, away from intimacy with your Lord and Savior as much as he can. And when fasting draws you closer to God, you're intentionally going, I want you. So he's going to try to mess that up. And so when you fast, pay attention because the things that kind of rise up to grab your attention, those are your hidden idols. Those are your temptations that you're usually too busy just going along and life is comfortable, so they're not really popping up. But now as soon as you're intentionally going after Christ, all of a sudden you'll start seeing this. And two, there is that biological factor that you're going to have self-control. You're going to have self-control over your physical desires. Right? You ever heard the term hangry? Right? Whenever you're so hungry, you get angry. What does the Bible say? The Bible says, in your anger, do not sin. So you don't get to use that, well, I'm just hungry, I haven't eaten in a while, low blood sugar. No, that's not an excuse. You still don't get to sin in your anger. And so it's this control that ends up getting, you get to see, whenever your, blood sugar's down, your hunger's up, right? Your nerves get a little raw. The things where your weaknesses are start to show more easily. And so as you fast, you'll actually learn about yourself, the areas where you need to maybe pray about and look at your weaknesses, your temptations. Also, fasting gets us ready for God's answer to our prayer. So as we're fasting and we're praying and we're seeking God, right, God's going to answer our prayer. God doesn't always answer prayer in the way we want, though, does he? Usually no, right? Because he's God, he knows better than we do, and so we're down here going, this is what I need. And he goes, no, that's not what you need this. Well, through fasting, you're already putting yourself in a mindset, in a position, in a posture of self-denial and dependency and humility before God. So just through the act of fasting, you're assuming the position of, Lord, I need you, I want you, please, denying my own gratification to seek after you. And so whenever he says, okay, here's your answer, it's not something you wanted, you're already in the attitude of, okay, denying my own gratification, seeking after you. Gives us perspective. Fasting acknowledges our spiritual self. Right? We have a tendency in our culture, what's really funny is I've actually found myself in conversations about spiritual things lacking the vocabulary to properly talk about them because our culture just doesn't talk about spiritual things. And when they do, it's usually some kind of metaphor or analogy. It's just like, our culture focuses on what's physical. And so often, so do we. But whenever you're fasting, you're setting aside the needs of the physical and pursuing after the spiritual. It's where you're, heard one commentator put it as living from the inside out. Right? So often we live from the outside in. But let's take care of our flesh. Let's take care of our desires. Let's take care of our appetites. Get the flesh taken care of. So I'd rather turn this around. Take care of your soul and then take care of the outside. One example that I thought about, and it's one of those weird things, because you think about, okay, so you're not eating, or if it's something else, okay, you're not going on social media, But the point is that while you're doing the fast, you're pursuing God. And so I saw a parallel to this in marriage, right? Because a lot of times in marriage, we get going, life's just moving along. You get up, you go to work, you come home, you eat, you do the dishes, you go to bed, you get up, you go to work, you come home, you eat, you do, and you get in this routine, you get in this, life's just moving along, and next thing you know, your spouse is someone you're sharing space with, but you're not sharing life with. And so, okay, we need to rekindle the intimacy, need to rekindle, right? And so what do? You make a date night, you do something where you're going to upset your routine, put aside your normal wants, your normal desires, and say, for this time, I'm going to do without the normal thing, and I want you. In a way, partly fasting is like that, where you're saying, you know what, God, I need to draw closer to you. I need to be closer to you. I need the intimacy with you, God. So you know what, this other thing in my life, I'm going to put it aside and make time for you. Even good things, right? Food is awesome. There should have been an amen in there, right? And it depends on who's cooking. Yeah. God didn't have to make flavors. He didn't have to make spices. He didn't have to make all these things where it's like, this is good and this is good. Put them together and oh my. He didn't have to make that, but he did, and it's good, and we worship him for the amazing gift of food that he gave us. But sometimes you have to go, I like the food, but I don't need the food, God, I need you. So I'm going to put aside even the good things in my life that get in the way. I'm going to make time for drawing close to you, God. Then, and this is more of a practical thing, when fasting, okay, kind of the purpose of the fasting is that we let it motivate us to pray, right? Because like I said, fasting and prayer go hand in hand. If you're fasting but you're not praying, you're not really fasting. You're just skipping meals. There has to be prayer. And so what happens? You're fasting, your stomach growls, and you go, oh, I'm hungry. Oh, wait, but I can't eat because I'm fasting. Oh, that's right. I'm fasting because, and it reminds you to pray. And so as you go, like me during Lent, I'm going along and I'm thinking, oh, I want to, I can't check the Facebook. Leave the Facebook alone because I'm fasting from Facebook. Why am I fasting from Facebook? Because I need to seek God and reflect on his sacrifice and resurrection, upcoming Easter. Okay, so now I'm thinking about that. And so you use the desire that you're missing as a motive to remind you to pray for the thing, which is the whole reason you're fasting to begin with. So, okay. Thoughts, questions? Just threw a bunch at you. And like I said, this could actually be, we could really dig into some of these things and stretch this out if we wanted to. But anything else that didn't make my list that I didn't think of, I didn't come across? That you've experienced that has been your experience in fasting or your purpose in fasting?
I know when I do it, you just feel so good the next day. Yeah, I think you give your body a rest. I really actually think it's good for you to do that. It's a good thing to do. I think it's good for our bodies to do that. And it's good, every time you get hungry, when you pray, it reminds me to pray to get those numbers.
Yeah. And you feel better after. I like that. That's, and again, it's one of those side effects. I don't know, they'll be like, I need to fast so I'll feel better later. Because part of the reason why you feel better is because you were fasting and the point of the fast and, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's.
And the next day you're more calm.
Next day you're more calm. And I think that goes back to the, you're putting the flesh aside and saying, no, I'm going to focus on the spirit. And what's the fruit of the spirit? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, right? And so you're more that's more of the fruit in your life. So after the fast, you just feel more grounded and settled in your relationship with Christ. Yeah.
Is there a way to fast wrong?
Is there a way to fast wrong? Well, trying to think because, yes, actually there is. And we'll hopefully get into that here in a little bit. We're going to get into some of where in Isaiah, where the Israelites weren't fasting in a way that pleased God, and he tears into them. So, but, one, like I said, is not a diet, so if you're fasting a diet, you're not fasting, you're just dieting. It's prayer. So if you're fasting, but there's no praying, you're just skipping meals. That's, all that is. But I think there can be wrong motives for fasting. And so we'll get into that here in a little bit. Any other thoughts along those lines before we go into my heading in my notes here of how should we fast? Any other thoughts? Okay. So how should we fast? First off, what should we fast? We think fasting, we think food, and that's the common thing. And because, like I said, there's something about what it does to you physically that I think adds to, but it can be, you can fast from anything. Anything that is a desire, a habit, something that you're going, I need to, that's too big a part of my life. I need to put that aside and focus on God. Anything where you're abstaining, denying gratification for something, and instead going before God in prayer. So that's, fast from whatever you need to. And I saw a lot of things. It's interesting because different people have different opinions on this, on the issue of medical issues. What was that? Okay. It's like, well, what if I have, fill in the blank with whatever medical condition. So it's like, I can't go without food. Well, it's like, okay, so you find a way that some people would say, well, that just you need to depend on God and he'll take care of that. Well, we're also supposed to love the Lord with all of your mind, which means not doing dumb things. And so, if it's, I'm diabetic and I'm just going to not eat for a week. Okay, no, let's not do that.
Get a martyr's crown.
What? Get a martyr's crown. There you go. Yeah. But, there are ways to fast. Some people fast from, food and water. That could be dangerous. There's this tension of, where, and we'll reflect on it here a little bit, where it, says, don't, fast to let people see, yeah, but if you're going to be doing a prolonged fast, let somebody know. So, and it's also good to fast communally. A lot of the places you see in Scripture where they're fasting, it's, hey, tell the people to fast. Right? In Acts, whenever they're commissioning Paul and Barnabas, the church is fasting. Right? It's a group fast, communally going before God. How long should you fast? Well, depends on your purpose and your circumstance. I remember in college hearing somebody be like, yeah, I'm fasting for lunch. I'm like, fasting for lunch? I mean, between classes and working full time and a social life, I could forget to eat all day. And it's like the next morning, I just happen to notice I'm really, really hungry at breakfast. Oh, yeah, it's because I didn't eat all day yesterday. And I remember, in college, it'd be like, we're going to fast. And it's like by day 3, I'm not even hungry yet. It's like day 3 before I'm even starting to feel it. So I hear people say, I'm fasting for lunch. But as much as my 21-year-old self wanted to laugh at that, fasting one meal is a thing, right? Fasting doesn't have to be a whole day or multiple days. And so you can fast just a meal. In the Bible, fasts were generally one day, right? A lot of times, like where the Israelites were commanded to fast, it was a day. And it was where, okay, I'm going to abstain from food and instead focus on prayer. Occasionally, fasts in the Bible were 3 days, right? In Esther, whenever she says, tell the people to fast and pray, they fasted and prayed for 3 days before she went into the king. You have a 7-day fast in 1 Samuel 31. That was a fast of mourning and lamenting of the people of Israel, because Saul had, their king had died and his sons had died, and the Philistines had got their bodies and stripped their armor and cut off their heads and hung them up on the walls of the city and everything. And so there was a group of Israelite men who went and bravely went in there and got the bodies down, and they went and buried the bodies, and for a period of 7 days, fasted and mourned. And so there's a 7-day fast, and then there's 3 occasions in the Bible where fasts of 40 days happened. Moses, when he received the 10 Commandments, Elijah when he encounters God in 1 Kings 19, and then, of course, Jesus being tempted in the wilderness. But those are all 3 highly unusual circumstances. I would not encourage a 40-day fast. And if you feel led to, make sure you have a medical professional who's aware and keeping in touch with you. But here's some things to consider about how we fast. What type of fast are you planning? Right? Are you, water fast, food fast, some other kind of fast? So you're considering, okay, I'm gonna a liquid fast. I'm not gonna drink. Well, okay, by day 3, you're getting in trouble, unless there is a miraculous intervention by the Holy Spirit. You're gonna need one if you try to continue that fast. So consider that. Have you ever fasted before? It's one of those kind of things where, okay, I'm going to go days without food. Well, have you before? Maybe that's not just something you just willy-nilly decide to do on your own and you fast with somebody. Hey, let's fast and pray about something, and you're there together with it. Might be wise to start with a shorter period of time. Consider your schedule. What?
Shorter fast, like lunch.
Shorter fast, like lunch. There you go. Consider your schedule. Right? If you're gonna be doing a prolonged fast, don't include days where you're gonna be doing high energy activities. I might want to plan that accordingly. Consider other people. I don't know, I mean, you do whatever you need to do, getting close to God. If your situation says, man, I've got to fast, and it's like the day before Thanksgiving, well, go ahead and do whatever you got to do. But it's like, this is a holiday where we're celebrating and being thankful. You're supposed to feast and draw close to God. And you show up to, family house, and they're like, look, all this wonderful food. And you're like, I can't, I'm fasting. After they went through all that effort and work for you to celebrate with you. I don't know. That, like I said, whatever if that's a time where it's just on your heart, you got to fast, you go and fast. But plan your fast on days where you're actually going to be able to spend time in prayer and seeking God. To just be like, okay, I'm skipping meals, but then you're just busy all day, and you don't actually take time to pray. Like I said, if you're not praying, you're not fasting, you're just skipping meals. Remember that fasting is for spiritual gain, not earthly gain. As we're about to get into. Any other thoughts on the length and kind of how-tos of fasting? Anything that missed my list or question about any of that?
I know there was one fast that we did before is where we fasted one day a week for 6 months. So it wasn't like a one day or it was a long fast, but it was kind of Lent.
Yeah.
Where Sundays you get to celebrate, it's kind of opposite of that. It was a long.
Well, and if you look in I don't think it's in the Bible. I think it was just the traditions the Pharisees had, but they were fasting 2 or 3 days a week. And you have some person like, okay, we're fasting. And I know that with the BSM, like with Beach Reach would be coming up. So it's like for months in advance, you might be doing that, 1 or 2 days a week, and you're fasting. I think I remember one time where, because we'd have the training like on a Sunday evening or whatever, or a Monday evening. And so you fast that day, and then whenever you're coming together, you're praying and preparing for the mission trip, and you've already been fasting all day for that. And so, yeah, that works. Okay. Fasting is for spiritual gain, not earthly gain. Again, it's not a diet. It's not like, what, if I fast and I pray, then God's going to bless me. I'm going to get stuff. It's going to be great. It's not, look at me, how spiritual I am. Jesus makes this point in Matthew 6, verse 16. It says, when you fast, do not be like the hypocrite. By the way, it says, when you fast. And we're never commanded to fast, but it's assumed we will. It says, when you fast, do not be like the hypocrites with a sad countenance, for they disfigure their faces that they may appear to be fasting. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward. Woe is me. I haven't eaten in 3 days because, I'm fasting, It's like, no, he says, don't do that. If all you're doing is going for accolades from other people, congratulations, you got it. And that's all you got. So that would be, one way to fast incorrectly is to do it for attention or to appear religious, pious, or spiritual. It says, but you, when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face so that you do not appear to be fasting. But to your Father who is in the secret place, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. So, don't fast to get attention. Don't make it known that you're fasting. Actually make it appear you're not fasting, if anything, because it's not about them. It's about God. The person you're fasting to impress, he's the one that already sees. You ain't got to show it off to everybody.
That's why I eat in front of other people.
There you go. I wonder why that's doing that. Okay. So this was a fun passage that I came across in Isaiah chapter 58. You asked about an example of how not to fast, and this is what we get. here in Isaiah. The people, this is, him saying, the people are saying, why have we fasted, they say, but you have not seen? Why have we afflicted our souls and you have taken no notice? And so God's reply says, in fact, the day of your fast, you find pleasure and exploit all your laborers. You're not fasting, you're taking a day off. You're like, okay, it's a holy day, it's a sacred day, I'm going to fast. Right? How many people are like, it's the Sabbath, so I can't work. What's on TV? Right? That's okay. Brandon says, you exploit your laborers. So you're like, well, I'm taking a day off because I'm fasting. I can't be going out doing strenuous work because I'm fasting. But get to work. It's not a sacred event. They're just taking the day off. Verse 4, he says, indeed, you fast for strife and debate and to strike with the fist of wickedness. You will not fast as you do this day to make your voice heard on high. So they're fasting pridefully for personal gain. Right? They're not doing it as a sacred act of prayer to have their voice heard on high. They're doing it selfishly. Verse 5, he says, is it a fast that I have chosen? A day for man to afflict his soul? Is it to bow down his head like a bulrush, to spread out a sackcloth and ashes? Would you call this a fast, an acceptable day to the Lord? It's like you're just going through the motions. Oh, you bow your head. You got the sackcloth and ashes thing going on. But you're just going through the motions. You think that, you can almost hear a little bit of like sarcasm. I don't know if sarcasm would be the right word. Some people don't like the idea that God would be sarcastic, but the idea of what you think this is acceptable to God? You think this is what God wants? Verse 6, is this not the fast that I have chosen? To loose the bonds of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, to let the oppressed go free, and that you break every yoke? Your fast isn't for selfish gain and sinful pride, but to free you from those things. Being freed from bondage and temptation. Verse 7, is it not to share your bread with the hungry, and that you bring to your house the poor who are cast out? When you see the naked, you cover them? Now that's an interesting take on it. Oh, by the way, you're skipping your meal. Well, since you're not eating it, give it to somebody else. Is it not the fast that you're seeking to be better, that you're drawing close to God, that you're seeking to be the people that honor him and follow him? And what does he say to do but to care for the poor and the hungry and the oppressed? It says, and to not hide yourself from your own flesh, right? That idea, your own flesh, your own people. I think the idea here is that you're being open and honest and sincere. Right? Whenever it's all about pride, whenever your life is pride, you basically have a facade. And you can't let anyone know the real you, because then they'll see right through you and know you're faking. That whenever you're living by pride, whenever you're putting on that front, look at me, I'm so great, you can't let people get close. You have to hide yourself from them. It says that if your fasting is proper, if you're doing this kind of fast that he desires, it says, then your light shall break forth like the morning, your healing shall spring forth speedily, and your righteousness shall go before you. The glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. You receive a blessing from the Lord. Now, it may not be exactly the blessing you're wanting, but the Bible says over and over again, you're drawing close to the Lord, he's going to bless you. Even though it may not be what we were wanting or thinking, as we've already said, those who humble themselves in fasting and prayer, draw close to God, they're already in that position that says, Lord, whatever you want to give me, that's what I need. It says that The glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. The kind of the hedge, the protection. One thing that happens, and there's another psalm I didn't include, but where David is actually talking about how, because of his fasting, because of his righteousness, that he's scorned and mocked, and people are talking about him because he's not doing the sinful things. Rather, he's honoring God. But that in that God strengthens him. He doesn't care about that. And so in that pursuing God, in that drawing close to God, through your fasting and your praying, you receive that strength from God as you draw close to him. It says, and then you shall call, and the Lord will answer. You shall cry, and he will say, here I am. So he's saying, hey, that fasting that's just a pretense, that fasting that's for personal gain, that prideful fasting, that's not what I want. Humbling yourself, coming before God. He says, yeah, that's when you're going to hear him say, here I am. So we humble ourselves. We say, you know what? I'm going to do without this thing because the situation I'm in, the thing that I need is God. And I need him more than I need food. I need him more than I need Facebook. I need him more than I need whatever you're fasting. It says, then you shall call out and the Lord will answer. You will cry and he will say, here I am. So that's my 2 cents on fasting. It's probably about all it's worth. Maybe 5 cents with inflation. Questions, thoughts, comments, experiences of fasting you'd like to share? Anything?
You got a comment.
Very good news, not having anything to do with your sermon. I'm getting that. I don't know if anybody gets the Temple paper, but it was a big article in there on Southern Baptist Convention ousting 3 churches because of participation in the LGBTQ, whatever that is. And that's they're not giving into this culture stuff, and that was good news. I couldn't believe they did that.
That's good. I'm just really concerned about where they're going to go with this critical race theory, social justice kind of stuff. Because they've already let it toe in the door. We'll see. We'll see. They were supposed to come back in 2020 and say, no, out of here. We ain't doing that. But because of COVID, there wasn't a meeting. And so, but yeah, no, that's good. Staying focused on, this is what the word says. Yeah, stand on the truth.
I wonder if we should call for fasting prayers more often in the church.
Yeah.
I don't know why we don't.
You can blame me. That's
Right
fine.
before you.
Well, and and that's one thing I was talking to James before. Y'all got here, just talking about, this is one of those spiritual disciplines that, I don't know, I've just kind of let fall to the side every now and then. Like I said, with Beach Reach, we do a fast, getting ready for a mission trip, or if there's something big, getting ready for it, whatever. But those were few and far between. That's a failing of mine. That it's just something I never pursued to make a practice of.
Don't do it on second Sunday.
Yep.
Leading up to second Sunday.
Yeah.
Saturday.
I think we can pray for our country.
Well, and I'll go ahead and say that part of the reason I wanted to do a teaching on fasting is the same reason why we're doing 1 Peter on Sundays. The world's going weird. And I know that there is concern about the future. There's just questions about where things going to go. And, you know, First Peter touches on a lot of dealing with hardship and persecution. And whatever's coming down the line is either going to be a new great awakening or perhaps a great persecution. Either way, we need to draw close to God. And so, hey, you know what? We need to become a people who fast. So let's talk about fasting. And so, but you're right. It's something we do need to do more often, more, you know, regularly as a church, you know? And so.
We'll fast before blood work.
So, yep.
And we usually fast for big things, but not for maintenance.
That's true. Fast for big things, but not for maintenance. Which you know, that's one reason why whenever it kind of occurred to me, kind of the comparison, and you know, let me know if you feel like I'm off base there, with like, you know, your relationship needing to draw close to God, you know, your relationship needing to draw close to your spouse, you know, well, maybe you need to, you know, go out on a date more than, you know, Valentine's Day and anniversary, you know, some maintenance romance going on with your marriage. Well, maybe we need some maintenance fasting going on with drawing close to God.
Valentine's Day saves marriages. It's enough.
So,
I'm good for another year. Come on.
Papa Rolo was every Friday.
man, would have thought it through. You plan your wedding so it's 6 months after Valentine's Day.
Yeah, so it's a,
So every 6 months
Yeah.
you got.
we weren't smart back then.
No, think of these things too late. All right. Anything else? Now we're just getting crazy. I blame James for that.